Ranch year one, water projects. Well, project number one was a pretty aggressive project. Turner designed it, laid it out with our laser, and utilized his drone to take some shots. He invited his fraternity brother, Sam Paradish, out to help us, and he was quite an excavator operator. And Tanner King to do some of the chainsaw work. He turned into quite the logger. It was a pretty big project for our first project. And two of my buddies from Oregon, from our Rotary Club in Oregon, Steve Feggi and Bob Dernetti, came out to lend a hand. They had a pretty good time running some of the equipment.
Bobby has a future in the 7.
Steve drove the dump truck quite a bit. This lays at the corner of our property on the east side where we share a fence line with the Goad Ranch. It's about 3/4 of a mile down to our creek to the left. And you can see Turner set this at the bottom of our hill with the idea that when it rained hard that we'd capture the water running off the hill. But we haven't really had any big rains since we started this project. When we do, I'm sure it'll work fine. So the only water in our pond so far has been the rainwater it collected. Here you can see our hugelkultur mound, which is basically a trench in which we placed all the brush and cactus, etc., that we cleared from the area and then covered it back up, creating a mound right on the topographical line, which will stop any of the runoff and allow it to soak back into the ground. We intend to do this on a lot more of our property. The whole idea is that once it rains, to not let that water leave the property, but instead to retain it so that it recharges our aquifer. It's a pretty good sized little earth project here. It's about 4.5 feet high, and then 3 feet or more of excavation on the backside. So probably at the deepest point it's 7 feet deep. It's probably only been, I don't know, 18 inches of water in it, maybe 2 feet with the rains that we've had so far. The brush that we cut after the hugelkultur trench, the guys laid across the hillside to capture or retain the dirt and cut down on erosion. We also covered the top of the dam with mulch from another project to cut down on erosion. We're trying to clear as much cedar as we can. It's an invasive species. It uses on average 23,000 gallons of water a year per plant. And it really chokes everything out. Chokes out the oak trees, etc., and all the native grasses. So our goal here is to recharge the ground with water so that when we do plant native grasses, they have a chance to reestablish themselves. The native grasses have roots that go as much as 3 feet down into the ground, so when they do die, they leave little capillaries for the water to filter back down into the soil. Turner also laid out this little ditch with a 1% grade, the idea of capturing the water as it comes off the hill and funneling it down into the pond. The piles you see here and in the subsequent videos are all the areas that we cut and stacked material, clearing it. This is our second project. This is on Telephone Pole Road, and the telephone pole blind simply called that because it's a road to an old hunting blind, and it turns off our main road at the one telephone pole on our property. And you can see the ground sort of slopes downhill as you drive down this little road. And that's our blind. That's really a nice 2-person blind. And the idea here is to retain the runoff again. And you can see the stacks of cedar to the left of the blind and to the right. And we basically just use the material that we excavated out of the bottom of this to create that little retention levee. And there's a little feeder there as well. It's really cool to be there in the morning or in the evening and watch the wildlife come and go. So this slopes from the left to the right, downhill to the creek. And we intend to raise that little levee about another 3 feet this summer. There's probably about 10 times as much water in that right after the rain. But again, we just want to catch it and let it soak in. Our third project started off as a simple little tiny retention area to capture the 150 yards of road water that came off of this road, and it did a great job. It was adequate for the road, and as you can see, created quite an environment for the grasses to reestablish. This is part of probably a 10 or 15 acre area that we have already cleared with the excavator and stacked the brush, some of which we've been able to burn. The rest will burn when the weather allows. Here in Texas, you can't just go out and light a fire. Those things go off like a torch. So you have to wait for a day with no wind and a little bit of rain. So this is a retention area that we put at the bottom of this swale so that it will hopefully capture all the water from about 4 acres. Hold it long enough to soak in. That area in the foreground is our next year's project. There's about 50 or 60 acres down there that we haven't even been in because it's so thick. So these are all the stacks that will be pulled together and burned. Right by the excavator's a pile, and up by the road's another pile where we've already burned all this area out of the middle. So that's some of our projects that we've done to try to keep the water on the land, or in the land. There's our ranch dog. Come visit. We'll put you to work.